The Vatican recently spoke out against the exploitation of lands and historical forced assimilation of native peoples. The document addressed the so-called doctrine of discovery. In it, the Holy See says taking land from original inhabitants has never been a part of Catholic teaching. It adds, however, that previous popes could have done more to address the rights of indigenous people. Joining us now from Rome is Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Andreas, great to see you. What can you tell us about this statement from the Vatican?
So, Tracy, I think this joint statement of two separate Vatican departments about the so-called doctrine of discovery is probably one of the most overlooked news coming from the Holy See. Of course, there's a reason for that. To issue this statement just before Easter is a little bit problematic, probably. And then with the health situation of the Holy Father, where he was brought to the Gemelli Clinic, also before Easter, there were simply no headlines left for this more historical news piece, as I would call it. But I think it's still important to talk about it. Cardinal Mendonça, he's the new prefect of the Dicastery for Culture and Education and the prefect of the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, Cardinal Michael Czerny, presented their joint statement clearly saying that this doctrine of discovery is not and has never been part of Catholic teaching. What do they mean by this? Well, this concept of discovery refers back to the early days of European colonialism, when human rights to indigenous people in Africa or America were denied or simply ignored. The Church has always sought to protect these rights of all humans as being created in the image of God.
And Andreas, why do you think the Vatican released this statement now? And also, what relevance may it have?
So we see that this statement is tied to recent travels of Pope Francis to places such as Africa and Canada. Especially on the North American continent, indigenous groups asked him to revoke this so-called doctrine. Of course, it's not a Catholic doctrine. In fact, it has nothing to do with the teachings of the Church. However, in their statement, the two cardinals now refer to three papal writings, so-called papal bulls, from the 15th century. So it's important to remember that we're speaking here about documents that were largely written before Columbus even reached the Americas. While the statement acknowledged that these writings did not grant equal dignity to indigenous, it also once more apologized for that fact. However, the cardinals also reminded us that in 1532, the bull Sublimis Deus by Pope Paul III, advocated in favor of indigenous people in both Africa and the Americas, clearly acknowledging their rights. And it also denounced any form of slavery. And this is extremely important to remember. While single missionaries might have been bad actors, and several popes also have apologized for the Church's role in colonialism, we must not forget that it was also missionaries and priests who recognized God's image in indigenous people and started to protect and advocate for them. A very famous example is St. Peter Claver in Cartagena, one of the biggest slave trade ports in Colombia, who ministered to the slaves in the 16th century. And he's just one of many examples.
Well, Andreas, thank you so much for this report. We appreciate it. Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Thank you again.